Welcome everybody to our second seminar talk in quantum mobile networks. So before introducing today's talk, I would like to ask the audience if there is any question related to last meeting's content. Okay, so if everything is clear from last talk, we can move on to today's talk. So for the students who need to obtain ECTS for this seminar, I have shared in the chat the link to the evaluation sheet and the link to the exercise question. So please don't forget to answer the questions by the deadline and to fill in the talk evaluation sheet at the links in the chat. You can also find them in the Ilias. Today's talk is going to be about simulation tools in quantum mobile networking and will be presented by students of the TU Dresden in Germany and students of the University Federal from Pará, Brazil. As usual, the talk will take around 30 minutes and will be followed by a 15-minute question and answer session. If you have questions related to today's presentation content, you can either write them in the chat and then I'll pick them at the end of the talk, or you can also directly ask them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Diego. I'm going to present on behalf of some students such as Yuri, Arthur, and Tarini. We are all from Federal University of Pará. Also, Suraj is presenting in this group. So we're going to talk about quantum network simulation. So I'm going to start with with a motivation around why we're doing simulation in quantum networking, what can be helpful from that, and what are the main challenges around simulation itself. So to start, many of you might be asking yourself, well, how can I do research if I don't have access to a quantum computer or even a quantum lab? Well, one of the things that you can do is actually doing the theory around it, but you also can use simulation. Well, the challenge around simulation quantum devices and quantum properties itself on a classical computer is that in a classical computer, you can actually only simulate a limited number of qubits. So it is also actually difficult to actually accurately simulate some quantum properties of superposition, entanglement, and coherency, so that even quantum simulation is done in some quantum computers. But for networks, we don't have the need for a larger number of qubits, and we can also use some abstractions. So most of the quantum simulations use abstraction called quantum gates and qubits abstractions. So what we do, I actually work with single bit qubits such as Hadamard gates and X and Z gates, and also 2 qubits gates like CNOT. And from those gates, we can create algorithms and protocols. There are very known software packages that work on this way, such as Qiskit from IBM. There are Google, Microsoft trying to do software packages that work in this way of you abstraction a quantum computer itself into those gates, those logical gates. But when you're talking about quantum networking simulation, it's very hard to create everything from scratch from this low gates and qubits programming. So for example, a simple teleportation circuit protocol would demand you to create all the steps from either creating the bell pair, the teleportation itself, and then the measurement. And for a larger network, this will be very time demanding in terms of programming if you have to create everything from scratch. So this is an example using Qiskit, which is, I think, the most known programming languages around quantum. But there are other alternatives, which are using specific purpose network simulators. So the idea of using network simulators is that they have pre-made components they are very helpful when you're talking about network simulation, such as the definitions of ERP pairs, how to send and how to receive messages between nodes, and also they work in a higher level of abstraction. So it is time saving if you want to research. There are some simulations that only focus in some specific applications, such as QKD, and others researchers actually choose to create their own simulation for test a particular problem or experiments. What we're going to do today is actually talk about multipurpose quantum network simulations. The idea is that you don't have to create everything from scratch, but you also can explore a broader problem, such as we want in this seminar. So one of those are NetSquid, from QDelph, QSP from Dreameter Group, and QNetSim, which is, I think, the most known network simulators. But there are also a few other of those. You can see, well, how can I know what network simulator I want to use? Well, one way is to go to a software perspective to see what programming languages are you aware and you know how to program or are willing to understand. Most of those are in Python, so they work like a Python library. Not all of them have open licenses, but they all are available for you at least to use their code. Some of those, like Simulacron Scratch, don't have actually a very active development right now. So you can use what they already done in the project, but if you have some problem, you want to, like a community that you can share your code and see, have some feedback, that may be hard. Another point that you want to know is how flexible is this network simulation. So if I want to change for some whatever reason everything that they pre-done, how flexible it is that I can do this in helping my project. So there are some simulators that have a higher flexibility than others. So NetSquid and QNetSim have a high flexibility. They already have many components there, but you can actually create your own component and replace those. But some projects like QSP, there is a very low flexibility. It's already have a lot of things done on the simulation, but it's very hard if you want to change, you know. So if I have a different opinion of how they create this, it will be very hard to change that up forward. Another way is to try to understand from the network's perspective. So we have what we call the network generation, which we can say that the first generation is just without error correction. So all of them only implement the first generation. If you want to test something in the second or third generation network, you will have to add that by yourself. Most of those, only QSP actually have predefined components such as rotor, repeat, and switch. So in NetSquid and QNetSim, you actually have to create your own rotor. You can add some functionalities that they already have pre-made for you to try to create your rotor, but you will have to do that by yourself. Also, in terms of what is being sent between the nodes, if it is a qubits abstraction, if it's already a package, or it's just like ERP component, like you have, it's like a resource way that you can see the network. So from the list provided by the seminar, and also for our understanding, QSP will be very good for us to focus on this seminar, because already have very good components, although it doesn't have a very large flexibility, but could help and solve a broader scheme of problems that we are facing. So I'm going to pass to Suraj. I think he can share the screen or present on mine. You're going to go deep into QSP.
Thank you, Diego, for such a nice presentation and starting it. So now I will share my screen.
Okay.
So good afternoon to all. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah. So good afternoon to all. I am Suraj, a PhD student under Professor Basili at TU Houston. Today I will give a talk on QISP, a quantum internet simulation package. So to understand how the simulation package work, we need to understand some of the quantum preliminaries like qubit and blosphere. So any quantum particle which we see around us, which actually we cannot see, but the most of the quantum particles like electron, proton, neutrons, even atoms and molecules even, which can be assumed to be in superposition of two different quantum states, can be regarded as a qubit. And generally we represent a qubit using a blosphere. So if we have an atomic qubit, or and then if the atom is in ground state, then we can regard it as a zero kit, or if it is an excited state, we can regard it as an kit 1. Now, if this blosphere generally helps us to represent qubits and all its possible states. So all the possible pure state which qubit can acquire can be represented on the surface of the blosphere, and while all the mixed state can be inside the blosphere. Now, if I had an initial quantum state which was in the zero state, that is like atom in the ground state. Now, if we apply a Hadamard operation, that is that may be an optical pulse, then the quantum state will transform from state 0 to a superposition state, that is 0 plus 1 by root 2. This particular quantum state represent that there is a 50% chance of atom, the qubit, to find it in the 0 state, and 50% chance to find it in the state 1. Now, these, as I already explained, these atomic qubits can be of different types, and like electromagnetic field, atomic qubits, nuclear spins, trapped ions, they all can be manufactured to behave as a qubit. Now, there are many peculiar quantum properties which are very essential for establishing such a quantum network. And one of them is quantum entanglement. So if we had initially two quantum bits and we apply a Hadamard operation, which I already explained in the previous slide, in the first qubit, and we apply another control NOT gate, that is like if the qubit of the first qubit is in is in one state, then the second qubit will flip, otherwise it won't. And if we apply this type of unitary operation to our individual qubits, both the qubits will be entangled, and they will be intrinsically coordinated, such that if we measure one of the qubit and see its measurement outcomes, we can actually predict what will be the outcome of other qubit on measurement, even though that other qubit can be very far from the first qubit. Another important important quantum experiment is quantum teleportation, in which and it will be very useful in quantum networks also. So in which what we see is that we have to transfer a known quantum state from Alice to Bob. So how we can actually achieve it is we can first send entangled EPR pairs to one of the EPR pair to Alice and one of the EPR pair to Bob. So for this setup, let's imagine we have Q1 and Q2 already entangled. Now, if Q0 is carrying some unknown state, now what we do, so first we create an entanglement, as I already explained, using Hadamard and C0 between Q1 and Q2. And after creating an entanglement, what we do is we take both the qubits of Alice and we decompose it in the Bell basis. So on decomposing the qubits of Alice in the Bell basis, and then we do measurement on Alice qubits. So, and then we measure both the qubits Alice have, take these two classical bits of information and send it to Bob. Once Bob receives these Alice classical measurements, he can actually apply a particular type of transformation operator to the last qubit, depending on what classical bits it got, and then finally reproduce the initial quantum state Q0 had. And this particular process is very powerful, and it is not easily seen in classical network, and it is one of the key players playing in the quantum key distribution. Now, to establish our quantum network, we need this quantum entanglement and teleportation. Now, how to entangle two nodes? Generally, we can entangle the different network nodes by doing a telebasis as the main central node. So, for example, what we do is like send one of the EPR pair to node B and one of the EPR pair from node C to node B. And at the central node, we can do a Bell state analysis, so Bell basis measurement, and then send the classical results, what we got from the Bell basis measurement, to individual nodes. Once these individual nodes will get the classical information, they can apply a particular type of unitary transformation operator and can get it actually entangled. So now if we see in current network quantum classical hybrid network architecture, what are the basic quantum links they are establishing and how they are entangled is like, for example, if we want to entangle two different nodes. So one is like we can place this Bell state analyzer at either of the node. So if we are sending components as a flying qubits, these are qubits, and to one of the node, and the Bell state analysis is being done on another node. This can be a way of entangling these two nodes. Another way is like we are sending flying qubits from both the nodes, and we can do the Bell state analysis or Bell basis measurement at the central node, which is generally a role of a repeater. So this is like memory interface, memory link, and the last quantum link which we can see to entangle these two nodes is like a memory source link, in which instead of doing a Bell state analysis, what we are doing is like we are already sending our entangled photons to both the nodes. So, for example, we can create a SPTs like spontaneous parametric down in some type of photon pair, and then we can actually send the individual entangled photons to each node to entangle the qubits present there. Moving on, how to actually extend it to a very large scale can be done using entanglement swapping. So, for example, I have Alice here and Bob at very far place. Then we can place a quantum repeater in between, and we can create an entanglement between one qubit of quantum repeater to with Alice one qubit, and in the similar way we can create the another qubit, quantum repeaters qubit with Bob's qubit. And now what we do is like we take both the qubits of quantum repeater and do the Bell state measurement. Doing this, it will automatically, and sending the classical outputs will automatically entangle the Alice and Bob's qubit, and we can increase actually create long distance entanglement using this procedure, and it has already been demonstrated in many current research. Now, in these processes, in creating such entangled networks, we have to face many noises and errors in the channel. So every time we create an entanglement, there will be some noises which will affect its fidelity and it will decrease. So how to we can actually increase or enhance the entanglement fidelities, and we need to actually do it for a proper network connection. How we can do it is like now we can actually use another very pure Bell state pairs and superimpose it with the current network, entangled network, and then again do the measurement, and in the process itself will increase the fidelity of the current link entanglement which we had in the network. So every time we have an entanglement swapping between different routers or repeaters, we can actually do purification. So we can do purification, and purification is just superposing it with already established very pure entangled states, so that the fidelity, every time we do a purification, the fidelity of entanglement between the network will increase. Now moving on, this QUISP generally works on the error basis. So like if we have a arbitrarily pure quantum state, we generally need a 2 to the power n complex number to represent it. But when the quantum state will be affected by errors, then we generally need a density matrix to represent it, and this density matrix will be 2 to the power n cross 2 to the power n matrix with this much number of complex numbers. And these density matrix can be very powerful in dealing with situation when there is errors in the system. Also, the n represents here the number of quantum states that particular state can have. That particular quantity. In the context of full quantum network, especially for 1G network, they used a superposition of 4 quantum states, and they can see that like how the errors are affecting it. So basically, for 1G network, where we have a superposition of 4 pure quantum state, it is completely traceable using using density matrix and QISP. Now, but when we extend it for 2G and 3G, where instead of 4 possible superposition of 4 possible quantum state, there are multi-parted entanglement involved. The simulation becomes tedious, and it requires a lot of memory bits to do calculation and manipulation. Now, so at the end, we can say that QISP works on the premise that the desired quantum state is known, and we have to track deviation from the ideal state in the form of error affecting it. So if we have a quantum state, errors are affecting it. We are trying to see how these quantum states are being affected by these errors, and then we are trying to simulate for the network. So to be a little bit more theoretical, we can say that like at an arbitrary time, a quantum state will be represented by m plus 1 pi t, where m is the number of errors we are trying to track. And all the and these errors can be Pauli X, Y, Z. They're like measurement errors, relaxation, and excitation. So every time the atom will decay and spontaneously decay to the environment, or will absorb the photon, and excite to the atom, excite to the excited state, or if the whole system is losing the photons, these all errors can affect our quantum network, and how this error probability vector will. So this m plus 1 minus pi t, this is the error probability vector. This will be a superposition, and this will be a tensor product of all the individual errors. And if we see the pi z, it represents the probability that the quantum state has been affected by the state J at the time t is normalized. Now, every time this particular simulation work on the premise that the evolution of the pi z is given by the transition rate matrix Q, independent of time, and pi t only depends on pi t minus 1. So every time it error will affect a quantum state, it doesn't depend on all the previous steps or previous errors which affected. It is like a spontaneous. Now, if we apply a transition rate matrix, this transition rate matrix Q to the pi t minus 1, basically the error probability vector at t minus 1, then it will give us what will be the outcome. We can actually initialize the whole initial state. And this particular transition rate matrix is the probability of transition from one particular error, probability error, to another error. So one particular pi I to pi z at a particular time. The simulator samples the error probability vector pi t before an operation on the qubit and applies the sampled error types. So now moving on, how actually we create a connection setup. So if we created an entanglement between each in the network, Now there will be an initiator which will create an initial setup request with all the requirements it need to have. And while this message will be sent, all the individual nodes and routers of the network will provide all its information to the setup request. And finally, a responder will get all these connection setup requests with individual QNIC's data. And finally, it will create a set of rules. This set of rules will help to define protocols and how to actually what to do with the data. And these rule sets will be distributed to all the individual nodes of the connection, and finally the connection will be established. Generally, this particular quantum this is a quantum and classical hybrid structure. So we have one software part where we see an analog of the current network software packages. Another part is there where we have buffers, quantum QNICs, which contains qubits and helps to store and manipulate the qubits information. These two classical and quantum packages will work together to define some set of rules and protocols which can help us to define the network and how to actually run the network. So if we have, for example, if we see this type of a small network, there can be a different paths. So if initiate and set asks for a responder to create a set of rules, so then the responder will provide the which particular path. So if we have two different paths, responder will provide us information to which path to choose. And these all things will depend on different, can be implemented on simulation platform like QSP, and more about it we can analyze it, and Thiago will now continue and will explain how actually you can see it on real simulator. Thank you.
This is the face of the QSP network simulation. So it was created inside a no network simulation called Omnet++. So it's basically a part of Omnet. You have to install Omnet, you have to install some other dependencies here. Basically, as we saw in the last slide, we have a .ini file and other .nid file. On the NIE file, what you have is the configuration of the simulation. So there are some basic parameters that you can set up, and you can say, oh, I want to run this network on the simulation. So if we want to create a small test, there is nothing much harder to be done, because you can use the general configuration of the QSP itself. And to create a network is very easy. There are some modules here that you can add, and then you can drag and drop those modules, such as PSA, which is the Bell State Analyzer, and you can create a quantum computer or a quantum node at least, and also add routers and repeaters to the network you're trying to create. You can create nice topologies using those. You can also choose to use the source code. So instead of using drag and drop, you feel more comfortable controlling those parameters in the source code. You can also use the same file where you can see how to create the network. There are a few parameters like speed of life in fiber, some submodel that you need to put on the simulation to work properly. But this is how you create a node. So it's very simple. You give it a name such as Alice, Bob, and just say, oh, it will be a key node. And then there is a file called key node there as actually controls everything that basic key node mode would work. So there are files like this that work for BSA, which is home controller, where we have basically the most vital functions for those. I can go deeper if you want to have some questions about those. The controllers give the properties of the messages that are being changed between the nodes itself. But if you just want to test the network, you don't have to change much here. But if you want to change the component itself, how they work, if that's relevant for your work, here is where you're going to do this. So I'm going to open a simulation here. So the simulation has just started, where we have some nodes here. Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dave are nodes. They are quantum nodes, and they have quantum memories. So these are memories. The ones in red, they are already in use for either sending flying qubits, or because they have to they are being used for a ERP pair that is being already shared. The ones in blues are the ones that are still available for use. So if you want to create a new ERP pair, you have to get from at least one qubit from Alice, and the other qubit will be from Bob. This is a package flowing.
Make sure that you're sharing the right screen. I think you're still on the code window.
Oh, okay. I will share again. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So you're supposed to be seeing a network right now.
Better. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So again, this is a network, a small sample network that we create. These Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dave's are quantum nodes, which can represent a quantum computer or quantum devices. Inside of those, you can find the software part where you can program. There's not much here to be seen. What is interesting here is the quantum memory. So we create each device with 40, so 0, 4, 39 quantum memories here. The ones that are already in red are the ones that are already being used in the simulation, either for sending flying qubits or because they have a previous ERP pair that is being used for this ERP pair will be consumed after the qubits being sent by teleportation, but they still have some available memories here. So maybe in your research, you want to study how many memories you have to have and how this will behave. It's easier to change that. You just put the number of 40 or 50 or 100 or 1,000. So this is something that you cannot do in a regular computer, but something that you can do in a simulation. So it's very easy to scale your problem. Here is the qubits that's flying from Alice. You're going to pass through the BSA and go to Bob. This is just a simulation that already started, and I pause it to show the network itself, and also how you can see the packets that are being transmitted. So this is basically one of the first parts of the simulation, with the link tomography requests are being changed. Also the notifiers. After that, there are a few photons that are being transmitted. So the idea of this simulation itself is that each node will choose randomly some node at for say a millisecond, and then we try to establish a communication. So how to establish this? They have to create a ERP pair. This ERP pair has to be maintained at least for the time they will send the photon. And this will go on until we finish the simulation itself. This is something that we can see here. And then you have like photons going on this part of the screen, and I would just hit start again for you to see. Okay, it's a bit slow. So the idea here is that the photon went back from Bob, and now Bob is saying another packet for probably Charlie. Charlie is trying to establish a VRP pair with Bob, and now it's Dave's turn. So there are like 30 messages being scattered here. And if I move forward to the, I can go like this and say, and this simulation continue, what will like be happening with Bob memory. So now there are less occupied qubits here. because probably already been consumed and being recreated. So now that he got a photon, and he has to say that that memory part is already being used. So when it gets full, it just keep rejecting the photons, the connections. This is from the rule-based idea. If you want to say no, if I get like a full queue, I have to do something else. You can change that in code. When I say that QSP doesn't have more flexibility, I mean in the way that you create the nodes. So I can put more memory here. I could change something in the software, but the idea continues the same. It has to also sit in a lot of stuff from the OmNet simulator. I'm gonna put another simulation here. Just gonna stop sharing and sharing again. I think this is a easy way that I can do. Okay, so now you're seeing another topology here, right? Yep. So the idea, the one that we were previously doing is this sort of ring topologies here. Also the connections you can create at any way that you want, not just linear. You can connect each node whatever way you want. The main idea is that you have to establish both a quantum and a classical channel. So the classical communication will run to the classical channel, and the B-qubits or the flying photons will run to the quantum channels. So in this simulation here, you also have some other components such as repeaters. It also has rotors. So you can see that you might have some closed networks. They have to communicate with different networks. They could be running different types of quantum computer itself. They have to communicate with somehow. They have to establish an entanglement between specific nodes. And the idea of this simulation is also that you can create these large networks and try to actually simulate a quantum internet. So many of the problems that you might see, we study in the NAS seminar, such as maybe routing, conjunction, and other things, we could study inside QSP. Because it already have some predefined components here. The rotor, the only routing here is actually called Q-Distra, which basically say which is the shortest way that a path of the path. So the rotor component here is responsible to actually choosing the road for the qubits. So if you want to go from B1 and have to go to, I don't know, A3, where it's going to do it, just one way. But if you have many complicated paths, it will be the rotor that we're going to choose. You can actually modify that routing ability and put whatever you want to be considered, for example. But you cannot change the rotor itself. So this is a way that it's flexible, but it's not that much inside OmNet. We have a little bit of time, I can also show another simulation too, if that is okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay, it's already on my Jupyter notebook. So we saw how you have to create, you have to download OmNet, you have to put QSP there, it's in C++, and you have the facility of using drag and drop, but maybe you're more interested in using Python. So this is using QNetSim, which is another simulation. Most of the network simulation actually work like this, just a library from Python you have to install with pipe or whatever you're working on, and just have to import some components that they have available. So you can see on their GitHub what components they have available for whatever you want. This is how you create just one EVRP pair. So you have to create a protocol for the guy who is sending the protocol and the guy who is receiving the ERP pair, and then you reuse this function. So it doesn't have a predefined function for that, something that you didn't have to do on QSP, but it's very easy to do this. And then they have to create a network. It's really straightforward. So I want 3 nodes. I can, ABC nodes. I have to start a node and then have to define what connection does it have. So A has to connect with B, B will connect with A and C will only connect to B. I can change whatever I want on this, but we have an impact. If it doesn't have a connection between the nodes, it won't send any pair or any photon. That's quite straightforward. But also different from QSP, you don't have to create both a quantum and a classical node. The add connection here is already considering both a quantum and classical nodes. And QSP, you might have some problems with those, and here is very easy. There are other simulators where you have to refine the channel itself, what probably the channel would be. This is good if you like exploring different channels, but not if you just want to send ERP pairs. So I just compiled this before, but you just compile the main here and sending 5 ERP pairs and saying, okay, everything is okay. I just do not want to establish ERP pair. I want to send code. I can send like in the super dense code where you have like the classical code in quantum bits. I can use super dense coding, and QNetSim already have a function for this, which is called super dense. And you just choose between the nodes that you want to send and just send it. So for the thing they already predefined, I think is very easy. So if you want to just study how sending super dense code works, I think this is a very easy way to understand that. Again, it is in Python, so there's maybe more libraries that I know instead of just full quantum simulations, and there are also many projects going on from this. So in this example, they use the ERP pair that we have created and just send super dense codes with one of those. So this is the difference between those simulations. Once you have more like a view that you would expect from network simulator. So many of you might be more familiar with using that. And maybe some of you might be more familiar with using Python and other stuff. But here I have a problem with scale. So I mean, this depends of your machine, and it's hard to create larger networks. In QSP, you can explore larger networks. So this is something that we want to share with you in the seminar. I think I can also go back to the presentation and go to the conclusion. Okay, so I have to go all the presentation now. And hands-on and the conclusion. Okay, so this is something points that we made. So network quantum simulation can have new resources and even old resources at this term. Okay, but the idea that really depends what you're interested in doing. All of those simulators have to be reliable. That's why we spend that time talking about how they actually work, the math involved, and they have to be reliable in physical ways. But they actually also need to be user-friendly, have flexibility, and also depends what problem are you interested in solving. And for our seminar itself, we actually didn't find any simulator that actually implement neither mobile or satellite networks. So this is open research problem. And maybe if some of you wants to tackle this issue, implementing inside QSP or either one of those Python simulations, I'd be happy to help with those. And thank you for listening to our presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. Very interesting, and I'm pretty sure everybody has learned a lot about the different tools to implement and simulate quantum networks. So we can open the question and answer session. So is there any question from the students and or from any other attendee from the audience?
Yes, and also a question, may I please ask several questions in a row because they are all interconnected?
It's better if we keep rotating a little bit. So try to ask your most pressing question, and then maybe we open for other people, and then we go around. Yes.
Sure. So I just wanted to ask first of all and foremost regarding these QSP Omnet. So which classical routing protocols has already been implemented so far? I mean, something like a BGP-like modern alternative, maybe.
Yeah. So what inside QSP, only a protocol called QDiscra. There's a paper involved. I may share if you want, which is basically just find the shortest path, which is with less nodes involved. But you can, inside QSP, you can calculate like things such as fidelity, and you can go on with that, and you can create your own protocol there. You just have to follow the rules set that they created. It's like a software architecture that they implemented those, and if you follow those, you can create any protocol that you want. Again, it has to be some reliable physical meaning, because in simulation you can create anything, like you can measure anything at any point, and maybe that's not feasible. So like BGP, those stuff you don't have. What you use in classical communication is the classical protocols that are already being used inside of Omnet. So if you want to like do classical routing, you can do that. But when you're doing quantum simulation, you actually does not do that. But you can import from other package from that. So maybe if you're thinking about managed routings, you have like some package that have managed classical managed routing. So you can try to see how that would look inside the QSP. Maybe it's something, I don't know.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. More questions? Okay.
Yeah, I have one more question.
Yes, Navid.
What about addressing in the Omnet simulation? Can you tell a little bit more about that? Like, what kind of IP address equivalents are being used, or?
Yeah. So literally, it's you using sort of IP because it actually didn't went through all the layers of a network, like a network stack. So the group that's using is from the group. They're very interested in creating an internet stack. But they didn't implement it in QSP already. So they have like in the GitHub. So like they have a set of goals that they want to do, like they want to do 2G, 3G networks, and they want to implement something. And this is also a point, like because they're still using addressing of those. So you cannot calculate distance from the addressing or something. You just use like, I can use like IP, or just go to, oh, this node is node 1 and the other was node 2 and a 3. I want you to for 1, 2, 2. And then on the side of the routing, okay, the best path is 1, 3, 5, 2, just like that. But the number doesn't have like a structure like IP or something, and actually doesn't have like a whole package, you know. So the package does have an address, the quantity of the bit. You can change like the fidelity or the currency or properties inside of the qubits that are being sent, like the phase or what base is in it, but so that goes inside the package, but it doesn't have like much on those yet. It is still a work in progress. The last update was February this year, so that will be interesting to do, like content packaging and addressing. That is interesting.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, do we have more questions?
Yes, I will have a question. So
Yes.
in the example you show, so at the end, what is the output, let's say, that we are interested in the few examples you have demonstrated? So
Yes. So the idea, you can actually get, for example, the number of packets that are necessary to establish ERP pair between some nodes, depending of the topology of the using and how that memory would interact. So, and a ring topology, you might be conflicts between packets. You can see that for the queue that's being formed. Different topologies will have different behaviors in terms of maybe routing or other stuff. But there's nothing much, I would say, like already predefined on that. You have a tool on Omnet that you can actually measure anything that you want. Not that, I mean, you can measure the behavior of a qubit and the route that is doing, but maybe not like physical possible in physically. I don't know, but in simulation you can see that. Those are basically examples for the topologies, how to create those stuff. Something they already implement a lot of is purification. So I think you have over 30 purification schemes and also tomography. So I believe there is something that are very interesting in that group. And there you see how that particular scheme interact in that particular topology with some parameters that you can change. You can change basically any physical parameters on those, and how that will maybe scale. So maybe some purification scheme is good with a small network. With a larger network, it would be feasible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope that
Thank you.
answer. Yeah.
Thanks. Do we have more questions?
May I please have another one?
Okay, yes.
So yeah, if you know stuff like simulators like GMS, for example, they do have an ability to import and export the modified ISO images of the operational systems, and even can go as far as importing and exporting, well, mostly importing the intermediate, like the exact category cable if you're using a copper, or the exact type of fiber. Do you know if this kind of stuff is available in Omnet++? Thank you.
Let's see if I understood. GNS3, it's a network emulator, right? Isn't?
Yeah, GMS is it's a classical network emulator, but
yeah. So yeah, so it's technically Omnet is not an emulator. You don't have any, like in the background, any like real computer. Is only like a simulation based. I think that maybe if you want like to test in a real computer, only thing that I know is like using Qiskit that I thought in the first part of simulation that can run on EBM. If you try to do a lot of teleportation there, like a communication between a network, it won't work very well, because you won't be like, you don't have much qubits available, and you'll be in the end of the queue because you're trying too much there. Maybe there is something between GNS3 and Omnet, because Omnet is a simulator, GNS3 comes from an emulator, and maybe you can do something inside QSP in the classical part, but I don't think it means a lot to use that for a quantum network, because you have to have something real, like to emulate, right? In mind answering your question, or going another way?
Yes, you absolutely did. Thank you very much.
Okay, cheers.
Okay, thanks. So do we have any last question? Okay, maybe then I ask you one. If I remember correctly, Qiskit has the ability of running both on a real quantum infrastructure and both on a simulated quantum infrastructure with a classical computer. Do you know if the other tools or the other simulators that you mentioned also have this capability, or Qiskit is the only one?
Yeah, so NetSquid is also from QDelf group, so it does have the ability to be run inside at least, I think, KASM simulator which is like a quantum mark real simulator. And I don't know if I can import that to the IBM. That's a nice question. Anyhow, maybe that's not actually a good way of doing this, because you have to, I mean, for you can like do a teleportation scheme or a small network, but I think up to 5 nodes, the code will be too large to run in IBM. I mean, I mean, at least in the free version, I don't know if you have access to some research or other stuff. I think we can have up to 8 qubits or something, but definitely NetSquid should have something because they're from the same group. The other ones, I don't think so. Every time you can do anything that you can do is like on Python, you can put that on the IBM coding. So technically, yes, but as I said, you have to create like a circuit again. You go back to the circuit logic, to the gate logic, and put that to run on the computer. Mm-hmm. So I think so, but I don't think that would be like a large scale on doing this.
Okay. Okay, so yes, thank you. So if there is any further question from the audience, please, you can write on the forum or you can contact the speakers directly. Unfortunately, we run out of time, so we have to go to a conclusion. So if I may ask, so this is totally optional, but if I may ask the presenters or who wrote the code for the simulators to share it in the forum or to send it to me so I can send it to the participants for who wants to dig a little bit more in the code, that would be great. Yes, and so in that case,
I can also put the tutorials from each of the simulators. I think would be nice.
Yeah. So in the sense that if the code used to show the demo today could be shared, then the students who are interested can also read a bit more or play with it and start the simulation, or even just installing Omnet would be great, you know, to familiarize. Okay, so let's see. So for today is all. So next week, next Friday, we will not meet because there is a Easter break. So we skip a week, so we can also give the opportunity to the to group number 3 to prepare better. So the next our next meeting will be actually on April 21. So we skip April 7 and April 14. So 2 Fridays we skip, and then we will meet virtually on April 21 with group 3, which is gonna have a talk about media access controlling quantum mobile networks. Okay, so that's great. I would like to thank again really everybody for attending, and especially the speakers for having prepared such a nice presentation, very insightful. And I will see you in a few weeks, April 21st. Okay. Thank you so much.